Before we jump into today's story, drop a quick comment to say hi. Tell me your name, where you're watching from, and let me know if you're sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Alright, let's get into the story. I never used to believe in haunted places. Growing up in the Midwest, everyone in town had their campfire story. The abandoned farmhouse on Mill Road, the cemetery where shadows moved against the moonlight, the old slaughterhouse that creaked at night. I had laughed at them all, but that was before I came to Hollow Pines. I should have listened. Friends, you enjoy listening to stories, but you don't subscribe to the channel or like the videos. I request you to please subscribe to the channel right now so that I get more motivation to bring you even more stories. If you help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I promise to bring you extremely scary stories with a truly real feel. 2 horror stories every single day. So go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now let's move on to today's story. When I first set foot in Hollow Pines, it didn't look like much. Just another fading New England town you'd miss if you blinked while driving through. It was nestled in the heart of rural Maine, surrounded by walls of dark forest and whispering pines. The houses looked older than time itself, white paint peeling, porches sagging, and windows dull with grime. The only sign of life was the general store, with a single dusty window and a bell above the door that screeched louder than it should have. I had taken a freelance writing gig, researching America's forgotten towns for a travel magazine. My assignment was meant to be simple. Stay a few weeks, take notes on the people, the culture, maybe dig up an old piece of local folklore. But something about the way the air felt when I first arrived told me this job wasn't going to be simple at all. The moment I crossed the boundary of the forest road leading into Hollow Pines, I swear I felt the temperature drop. The trees seemed to lean over the highway, as if trying to keep me out. My car rattled across the cracked asphalt as though it was nervous too. The motel, if you could even call it that, was a 2-story husk with letters missing from the neon sign. HLLOPNS Inn. The only light in the entire place was the faint buzz of the flickering sign. When I checked in, the woman at the front desk didn't look me in the eye. She slid the key across the counter, her hands trembling slightly, and muttered, "Room 6. Don't go walking at night." I almost laughed, but something in her flat, dead serious tone made me pocket the key without asking questions. The room was worse than I expected. Grimy carpet that smelled like mildew, wallpaper curling at the edges, a bed that sagged in the center like it had been used for 100 years. But I told myself I could handle it. After all, this was just a job. That first night, something strange happened. As I lay in bed, notebook by my side, the wind outside became louder than I'd ever heard before. It wailed. That's the only word for it. It wasn't just the sound of trees swaying or branches scraping glass. It was a human sound, an aching, as if the wind carried voices. I tried to shake it off. Old buildings make weird sounds. Forests can trick the ears. But at exactly 2:14 a.m., the time is burned into my memory, I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragging, the echo of weight shifting from heel to heel. At first, I thought it was another guest, but as I strained to listen, something felt wrong. The steps didn't sound like shoes against carpet. They were heavier, stickier, like bare feet coated in something wet. They stopped, right outside my door. I held my breath. The knob rattled. I stared at it, frozen, waiting for it to turn. But after a few seconds, the sound stopped. Silence fell heavy, pressing against my chest. I sat there for hours, unable to move, until exhaustion finally won. When daylight came, the hallway was empty. No mud, no wet footprints, nothing. Almost as if the night itself had lied. The next morning, I went into town with my notebook, trying to gather information. Most people wouldn't talk to me. They avoided eye contact, shook their heads, and turned away like I was contagious. Finally, at the general store, an old man behind the counter spoke to me. His face was wrinkled like carved bark, and when he talked, it sounded like gravel shifting. "You're not from here," he rasped. "No, sir. I'm writing about towns like this, forgotten places." He studied me for a long time. His cloudy eyes flicked toward the window, where the pine trees loomed like they were listening. Then he leaned forward across the counter. "You need to leave," he said. "Excuse me?" "Leave. Tonight. Before it finds you." I almost laughed again, but something in the certainty in his voice silenced my reply. I left with only a pack of cigarettes. I didn't even smoke. The second night was worse. I woke at 2:14 again, exactly the same. The footsteps returned, dragging, slow, deliberate. This time they didn't stop at my door. They passed, moved down the hallway, and then came back. Back and forth, back and forth. I pressed my ear to the thin wall. With every pass, I could hear soft breathing, wet, ragged, wheezing. The smell hung in the air now too, iron and rot, like something had died in the hallway. On the third night, they didn't just pass by, they stopped again. The knob rattled harder, the wood creaked, and this time I heard whispering, low, overlapping voices, too many to belong to one person. They whispered directly through the door as if pressed against it. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My pen rolled off the nightstand onto the floor, and the whispering stopped instantly. Silence. Then 3 hard knocks. Not random, not polite, precise. 1, 2, 3. By dawn, I had made up my mind to leave. But Hollow Pines seemed to have other plans. I packed everything into my car before sunrise and started driving the only road out of town, the one that cut through the forest. Fog clung low to the ground, coiling between the trees in heavy strands. But after 20 minutes of driving, I saw the same wooden sign that I had passed on the way in. Welcome to Hollow Pines. I thought I had made a mistake. Maybe I'd turned around, so I kept driving. Another 20 minutes passed. Again, the same sign. By the third time I saw it, my stomach lurched. The gas gauge was dropping, but every road curved back to Hollow Pines, like the town was swallowing me. When I returned to the motel, the woman at the desk was waiting, standing stiff as a statue. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Told you not to walk at night," she murmured. And then she slid an envelope across the counter. The envelope had no name, just a torn edge.
Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Tragedy in Hollow Pines. Dozens lost in fire at old asylum." The photograph showed a charred structure deep in the woods. Survivors described hearing screams from the trees that never stopped. My blood froze. The article was dated September 24th, 1925, exactly 100 years before the day I had arrived. I must have read that article 100 times, tracing the faded ink with trembling fingers. 57 patients, 12 staff members, all burned alive when flames engulfed the Hollow Pines Asylum. No cause was ever found, no bodies ever recovered. "Do you believe everything you read?" the woman at the desk asked suddenly, her eyes fixed not at me, but on the fog seeping through the glass door. "What do you mean?" I asked. She pressed her lips tight. "The pines don't let things rest. Fire didn't kill them. Fire only changed them." Her words lodged inside me like splinters. I wanted to demand answers, to shake her until she explained what was happening. Instead, I stumbled back to room 6, clutching the clipping. That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I sat upright, waiting, listening, pen scribbling nervously across paper like it could protect me. At exactly 2:14, the footsteps began again. But this time, something new joined them, crackling. Not like wood creaking, but fire. I swear I smelled smoke seeping under the door. When I looked down, a thin finger of gray vapor was curling across the carpet. And then I heard it. The screams. Not just one, dozens, layered over each other, shrill, agonized, rising higher and higher until it pressed like knives into my skull. I clutched my ears, but it wasn't enough. The cries weren't from outside, they were inside my head. When I blinked, for the briefest second, I saw orange light flickering through the cracks of the door as if the hallway were burning. I don't know how long I sat frozen. By the time I blinked again, the smoke and firelight were gone, silent. But there was something new. On the inside of my door, written in soot-black streaks, were 3 words. "Join us soon." Sleep no longer came. Days blurred, nights sharpened into blades. Every hour past sunset was a countdown to 2:14. I became obsessed. By day, I searched the town records, the library's locked basement cabinets, even old microfilm reels. By night, I endured the footsteps, the screams, and the whispers that pressed against the door until it shook in the frame. I found one name that kept repeating. Dr. Eliza Warren. She had been head of the Hollow Pines Asylum. Some files painted her as a pioneer of treatment, a savior of the mentally ill in the 1900s. Others whispered of cruelty, of experiments hidden in the asylum's east wing. The fire consumed it all before anyone could find out the truth. Locals refused to speak her name, but one night, hunched in the dusty library, I found a diary entry from a townsman dated the night of the fire. They say she walks the trees now, eyes hollow, mouth full of ash. She calls them every night at the same time. The pines answer. The pines answer.
I don't know what compelled me, but I couldn't stay away from the woods any longer. I needed proof. At dusk the next day, I drove out of town, following a narrow dirt path that snaked beyond the last house. The trees closed in immediately, swallowing what little sun remained. The deeper I walked, the quieter the forest became. Even birds avoided that place. The air smelled different there, acrid, sharp, like charred wood never faded. And halfway down the winding trail, I found it, the ruins. All that remained of the asylum were stone foundations blackened by old fire, walls half swallowed by vines, and twisted beams leaning like broken bones. But the strangest thing was the ground. It was warm. When I knelt and touched the soil, heat seeped into my palm, like embers still glowed beneath it, a century later. And then I heard voices. Not whispers this time, clearer, closer, calling my name. The sun fell quickly in Hollow Pines, as if night wanted to arrive early. The ruins glowed faint orange under the twilight, though no flame burned there. Then, between the pines, I saw her. Tall, emaciated, her face pale as ash, eyes nothing but hollow sockets. A torn doctor's coat hung from her body like scorched parchment. Dr. Warren. She didn't walk toward me, she slid. Her feet dragged across the soil without lifting, as though she floated just above the ground. With every step, whispers swelled, and the tree line itself seemed to shiver. "Why are you here?" I croaked through a trembling throat. Her head tilted. Then she raised her hand. Behind her, the shadows moved, dozens of them, limbs warped, jaws slack, eyes blackened with smoke. The lost patients. Their hollow throats sang the same scream I had heard in the motel hallway. Every tree groaned and leaned closer. I stumbled back, panic tearing through me, but the shadows followed, patient, deliberate, their steps matching the rhythm I'd heard every night at 2:14. I ran. Branches clawed at my coat, roots snagged my shoes, but somehow I burst free of the woods and collapsed in the dirt road, my lungs burning. When I looked back, the forest was calm, still, like nothing had ever moved at all. But I knew better. When I stumbled back into the motel that night, my clothes were torn with brambles, and streaks of dried blood marked my arms where branches had cut me. The woman at the front desk wasn't there. The lobby was dark, silent, as though she had never existed. I climbed the stairs to room 6 with dread swelling inside me. Every rational part of my mind screamed that I should leave, pack up, abandon my car if I had to, and just run until my feet bled. But reason doesn't work in Hollow Pines. The town doesn't run on reason. It runs on rules that don't belong to the living. When I opened the room, the air was different, heavy, damp. On the bed sat my notebook, but I hadn't left it there. The pages were open, and my handwriting was sprawled across them, except the words weren't mine. Line after line filled the paper. 214, 214, 214. Join us, join us, join us. The pen by the page was still wet with ink. I backed into the corner of the room, bile rising in my throat. That's when I noticed the smell again. Smoke, rot, and something coppery, metallic. The bathroom door creaked. It had been closed when I left. Now it opened slowly, inch by inch, until the mirror inside reflected just enough. For a second, I thought I saw myself, but the reflection wasn't right. My body stood there, but my face wasn't my own. It was darker, hollow-eyed, lips split and burned, skin sagging as if melted by fire. The figure raised its hand in the mirror, though my hand had not moved at all. When its mouth opened, smoke poured out. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, trembling. That's when the clock blinked on the nightstand. 2:14. The footsteps came heavier now, shaking the thin walls. They dragged up and down the hallway like a stampede of bodies, but too slow, too deliberate to belong to anything alive. The knob to room 6 rattled, harder than ever. I shoved a chair under it, knowing deep down it wouldn't matter. The whispering returned, louder, overlapping voices, dozens of them, and this time I could understand the words. We burn, we walk, we breathe through you. Then came the knock. 1, 2, 3. But it didn't stop. 3 again, then 3 more. The door boomed against the frame with every strike, louder, faster, until it was shaking on its hinges. I pressed my back harder against it, but the blows rattled through my bones. I screamed at them to stop, but my voice was drowned by theirs. And in the chaos, I almost didn't notice at first. Something was inside the room with me. At the far end, near the shadowed corner, a shape peeled itself from the darkness. A man, charred, his jaw slanted wrong, smoke leaking from the socket where one eye should have been. He didn't walk, he staggered, feet crunching across ash that wasn't there. I wanted to run, but my body refused, pinned by terror. He came close enough that the burnt stink of him filled my lungs. His lips parted, and instead of words, embers spilled out, glowing faint against the carpet. Then, with a sudden snap, all went silent. No footsteps, no knocking. The figure dissolved like char against wind. The clock now read 2:17. 3 minutes. That's all they needed to show me what was coming.
The next morning, sunlight didn't feel right. It was weak, pale, and didn't warm the skin. I left the motel and found the old man from the general store sitting outside, rocking slowly in a chair. His cloudy eyes followed me without surprise. "They've marked you," he muttered. I swallowed hard. "What do they want?" His jaw tightened. "The pines don't let go. They've been calling since the night of the fire. Anyone who enters, anyone who hears them, belongs to them." "No," I shook my head. "There has to be a way out. There has to be." The old man leaned closer. "That's what we all thought." I froze. "We?" His eyes burned with something both hollow and sharp.
Hollow Pines has no outsiders. Once you arrive, you're already part of it. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I couldn't shake the truth in his tone. I thought of the looping roads, of the woman who warned me, of the endless 214 footsteps. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a trap. And I was already inside it. Something snapped inside me that morning. Sleep had already given up on me, reason slipping away in pieces. Every corner of Hollow Pines pulsed with an undercurrent of dread. Windows where fabrics shifted though no one lived there. Streets so quiet they felt less abandoned and more watched. Even in daylight, I swore I heard faint dragging movements just beyond sight, as though the shadows had learned to follow me slowly, patiently. I told myself I needed air, to leave the motel at least until the sun went down. Wandering the streets, I found another piece of the puzzle, or what I thought was a puzzle. At the edge of town stood a church, boarded up, its steeple cracked and slanted. Someone had scrawled words across the doors in black charcoal, half faded by rain, but still legible. 214. The door opens. That was it. No name, no explanation, just confirmation that the time wasn't random. 214 wasn't just when the dead screamed, it was when something passed between two worlds. I circled the church, looking for a way in. Its windows were stained, colored with gory fragments of saints melted into grotesque shapes by the elements. Behind the building, I found a sunken cellar door chained with rust. And though locked, I could hear faint scraping coming from beneath it, from inside. I didn't open it yet. Not yet. By the time I returned to room 6, dread sat in my lungs like drowning water. I knew what was coming. I could almost hear the ticking clock counting down to 214. I sat with my notebook again. I wasn't writing anymore, not really. My pages were filled with frantic scratches, incoherent lines. They want through. I am the door. Sometimes written in thick gouges that dug through the paper as if my hand had been forced. This time, I didn't wait in bed. I sat upright in the chair by the door, staring directly at it, refusing to let it catch me off guard. The footsteps came, heavier than ever. Not just one set, but many, dozens. The entire hallway was alive with dragging feet, wheezing lungs, the stench of old fire. The knob twisted. The chair shuddered under pressure until it scraped across the floor by itself. The door wasn't shaking anymore. It was swelling, bending inward like something immense was pressing against it from the other side. And then came the voice. Not whispers this time, not screams. One single voice, calm, commanding, female. Open the door. Dr. Eliza Warren. Her voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. It slid through the room like smoke, wrapping around me until my chest felt tight. I clutched my ears, screamed back, "No!" The silence returned for only a second. Then 3 knocks. 1, 2, 3. And the wall beside me blistered with heat. When I turned, the wallpaper was blackening, curling, smoke hissing from its seams. Beneath it, faint orange glimmers pulsed like veins of fire were growing inside the walls. She whispered once more, closer, right against my ear despite the shut door. "You've already let us in." On the 5th day, I desperately attempted to leave again, this time on foot, down the long highway cutting past the pines. I didn't care if it took hours or days. I would walk until my legs collapsed. But after hours of walking through twisting roads and trees that pressed too tightly against the edge of pavement, I stumbled onto the same town sign again. Welcome to Hollow Pines. And standing beneath it was the woman from the motel desk, except she wasn't behind a desk anymore. Her skin was stretched, cracked with burns. Her eyes were black voids that wept smoke. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there with her mouth open slightly as though waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I turned back to the motel, broken. There was no leaving. That night, I didn't even resist sleep. When darkness came, it came heavy. And I dreamed. Or maybe I didn't dream at all. I was standing in the forest, barefoot on soil that smoldered with hidden embers. Around me stretched long rows of shadowed figures, their heads tilted upward, mouths open, exhaling smoke that rose like a black veil into the branches. They weren't screaming anymore. They were chanting. And standing before them all was Eliza Warren. Her hollow sockets locked onto me, her arms raised slightly, fingers crooked like claws beckoning. You already belong here.
By now, I couldn't tell where dreaming ended and waking life began. Hollow Pines was eroding me, piece by piece, the way the fire must have eroded the asylum a century ago. Slow, merciless, leaving nothing but char. Every time I looked at my reflection, I swore it lingered too long, blinking a fraction too late, breathing slower than I did. Sometimes its lips moved, whispering words no sound carried. By day, the town only grew emptier. The stores were abandoned now, shelves stripped bare as if they'd never been stocked. The old man from the general store's rocking chair sat empty, swaying back and forth even with no wind. And by night, every hallway step, every whisper, every knock grew louder, closer, more violent. 2:14 wasn't just a haunting hour anymore. It was the toll of inevitability. The pines weren't asking, they were claiming. On the sixth sunset, I lingered outside, staring at the tree line. Something in me knew I wouldn't survive another night in room 6. That's when I saw her, the motel woman, but different now. She was standing at the far end of the road, skin cracked and scorched, like a wax figure left too near a flame. She didn't walk toward me. She didn't have to. Her voice slithered instead, close to my ear, even across the distance. "They'll take you tonight. The pines don't need your permission." Why me? My voice quivered, pathetic against the silence. Her head tilted back, mouth opening wide, wider than it should, jaw splitting until it looked ready to snap. Smoke gushed out, curling like black snakes toward the woods. When her jaw finally closed, she smiled. "Because you wrote it down." I glanced at the notebook in my hand, its pages filled to the brim with their whispers, their messages, their names. I wasn't just recording them, I was inviting them. I had become the paper door through which they walked.
That night, I knew I couldn't hide. Room 6 would shatter under their pounding. So instead, I followed the path willingly. Back to the forest. Back to the smoldering soil. Back to the black skeleton of the Hollow Pines Asylum. The ruins glowed faintly, as though the fire still licked its edges under the skin of the earth. The air choked with soot that didn't belong to now, but to then. And waiting for me in the center of the crumbled foundation was Dr. Eliza Warren. Her hollow sockets stared, glowing faint orange deep inside like embers. Around her stood the shadows of her patients, swaying, trembling, their burned mouths gaping open as one thick sound poured from them. Not screams now, something lower, something like chanting. I wanted to run. My legs pretended to move, but the ground sucked at my feet like hot tar, dragging me to the circle. "Why me?" I whispered again, choked of breath. Dr. Warren's lips parted into a smile made of ash. "Because you believed you were here to observe, but you were always here to replace." At 2:14, the forest lit with phantom flame. The asylum walls appeared again, whole, burning, collapsing in reverse as though the fire were eternal and present. The shadows pressed closer. Fingers clawed with char, teeth blackened, their hollow eyes focused not on Warren, but on me. The notebook in my hands vibrated, pages flipping as if caught in invisible wind, until it stopped at a blank sheet. My pen, no, not my pen anymore, slid across it, scratching words by itself. "We walk in Him." I screamed and hurled it into the firelight, but when I glanced back, it was still in my hands, still open, still writing. "He walks in us." The chanting surged. My heart thrashed against my ribs. Dr. Warren raised both arms, and with that motion, the shadows moved forward, melting into me, one by one. Smoke poured into my mouth, into my lungs, until I felt my chest ignite. I clawed at my throat, but no air came, just ash. Just fire, just their voices, layered on mine, screaming without sound. The last thing I saw before the dark swallowed me was Warren's empty sockets narrowing, almost satisfied. I don't know if I died in that moment, or if dying is irrelevant here. But I know this. I woke in the motel hallway, outside room 6. My feet dragged against the carpet, smearing trails that stain and vanish in rhythm. My chest wheezes, heavy with smoke that never leaves. Every night, at 2:14, I walk the hall, dragging burned flesh in patient steps. Sometimes I stop at the door. Sometimes I knock. 3 times, waiting for the next one to answer. Hollow Pines doesn't let go, and now I am part of the pines. There's no time anymore, only the cycle. I drag my ruined body through the thin motel hallway, and though it looks short, I know it isn't. The corridor stretches, bends, folds back into itself. Every night, every 2:14, I walk, and still the end never comes. Sometimes as I pass the doors, I feel living presences inside them. Outsiders, the way I once was. They're breathing, quivering, clutching some desperate thing. Faith, luck, willpower, thinking it will save them. I pause at their doors, rest my burned hand against the wood. I hear their repressed sobs, their hope. Knock, knock, knock. I cannot stop myself. It isn't choice anymore. It's law. The pines move me like a marionette.
I thought the town was empty, but now my burned eyes see more than before. During the day, Hollow Pines is full, teeming with motion. But the people aren't people. They're echoes. Their bodies flicker between burned husks and the living shapes they once wore. The general store man still rocks in his chair. The woman still stands at the desk, but now I see her throat rising and falling with smoke, not breath. They look at me and nod, weak approval, like new co-workers greeting the latest hire. When I step into the general store now, I see shelves filled with things that weren't there before. Candles melted into bone, jars filled with what looks like blackened teeth, notebooks half burned, always half full of frantic writing. None of it for sale, just displays, tokens left behind by the ones before me. The old man waves when I walk in, ash crumbling from his hands like flour from a baker's palms. His cloudy eyes no longer hide what he is. "You're settling in," he says with a brittle smile. I want to scream at him, tackle him, demand how to get out, but my throat only releases smoke. The pines won't let me protest anymore. That night, I was pulled to the woods again. Not by choice. I don't think choice exists here. My feet rasped over needles and ash until I reached the ruins that glowed faint even without fire. They were all there this time, not just a handful of shadows, but hundreds. Men, women, children, burned, blackened, eyes hollow, mouths stretching unnaturally wide as their chants rose to meet the stars. At the center, Dr. Eliza Warren. She raised her hand and the rest fell silent instantly. Her sockets fixed on me, and for the first time since the pines took me, I felt separate again. A little spark of myself caught under her gaze. "You write still?" she said, voice both inside and around me. "Good. We need recorders. They keep the hollow alive." My notebook appeared in my hands even though I'd abandoned it in the fire. Pages shuffled open on their own. My blackened fingers closed around the pen. The pines didn't ask if I would write. They moved my hand and I scrawled words I didn't shape. The hollow grows on witness. The pines open on memory. He writes, "Therefore we remain." When the pen stopped, I was shaking. Dr. Warren tilted her head at me, a mother proud of her disciple. "You, like me, will lead them someday. Every century the pines renew. A voice, a face, a door. Welcome."
Her sockets burned brighter, and when I looked down, I realized my chest glowed faint orange too. The fire was inside me now. It isn't about haunting. It isn't about revenge. Hollow Pines isn't just keeping its dead. It's recruiting its replacements, layer by layer, face by face, until this town exists as a door between what the world calls living and something endlessly darker. And I am now part of the door frame, which means if you are reading these words, you're already touching the other side. Time doesn't move here like it should. It folds, it rots. One evening, not sure which, not sure how long it had been since my ash-laden sleep, I noticed something new at the motel. Room 7, silent and dark for all the nights I had walked past it, now had light glowing beneath its door. I froze. My burned lungs constricted. That meant only one thing: a new arrival. I heard them pacing inside, muttering to themselves, their voice alive, full of fear, the same notes I once spoke in. They hadn't heard the footsteps yet. They hadn't smelled the fire. At 2:14, when my body began its usual dragging down the hallway, I stopped outside room 7. My charred hand rose without my permission. The knocking rhythm started. 1, 2, 3. From inside, the muffled gasp of someone shoving a chair against the latch. The same futile defense I had tried. The same denial. I wanted to scream through the smoke, "Run! You can't! Leave before it takes you!" But my throat betrayed me. Only ash whispered from my lips, feeding the chant of the pines. And I understood with unbearable weight, this is the cycle. Someone always comes, someone always writes, someone always joins. The next day, I walked through Hollow Pines with new vision. I saw the lairs now. The whole town is not a place, it's a mechanism. Each building, each street, each ruin is a gear in something older than Dr. Warren herself. She didn't create it, she just fed it. The boarded up houses, their shells for the dead, waiting to be filled. The stores, displays not of products, but of offerings to keep the hollow awake. Even the motel itself, it's the funnel. Strangers arrive there first, because that was always the design. Rooms as waiting chambers, doors as boundaries waiting to be breached. And the forest? The pines themselves are no ordinary trees. Their roots dig down too deep, feeding not from soil, but from memories, voices, souls. Each pine trunk is crooked because it grows around the shapes of the dead bound to it. If you press your ear against the bark, you can hear screaming within the rings. Hollow Pines doesn't haunt, it harvests.
That night at the ruins, under burned beams that still smolder after a century, Dr. Warren came to me again. The crowd of shadows swayed, their mouths open, their smoke rising like incense. "You've seen the truth," she said, voice carrying through the hollow sockets. "The hollow requires a keeper, one who watches, writes, recalls." She gestured at me. There must always be a door. I argued, or tried to. My body shook with resistance, but the pines already lived in my marrow. Smoke curled from my eyes like tears. My notebook glowed faint on the page, ready to be filled. "You are the next," she whispered, "as I was, as the one before me was. When your turn ends, another comes, always, forever." My lungs burned from within. My hand raised the pen without my will, and I wrote, "The hollow pines keeps its keeper." The worst is not the fire, not the shadows, not the endless 214 hallway. The worst is that I remember being me. I remember highways, coffee, music, real sunlight. I remember laughter. I remember doubt. I remember every heartbeat that once belonged only to me. And those memories have flavor, flavor that the pines devour slowly, savoring the last sweetness of me while layering ash atop it. But here is the final cruelty. As I write this, as I carve every word into this book of smoke and ash, you are reading it. You are part of the memory now. You are no longer outside. Because once you know Hollow Pines, once the name stains your thoughts, it knows you too. And maybe on some night when your clock flickers 2:14, you'll hear footsteps begin in your hallway, dragging closer. The cycle doesn't only stay here. It spreads through story, through memory, through writing. That's why they chose me. That's why I write. That's why you now carry this curse forward. The first sounds from room 7 were begging. I could hear the newcomer whispering to themselves, "Just a dream. It's just the pipes. Please, God, just pipes." That was me once. I lingered outside the door longer than before. My burned fingers pressed against the wood, and I felt their pulse thudding on the other side, fast, desperate, clinging to every shred of denial. The pines used me. They bent my voice. And when I tried to warn, this was what came out instead. "Open the door." The words weren't mine. They belonged to her, Dr. Warren, but they came through my lips. The crowd sobbed, the chair scraped on the floor, and though they didn't know it yet, every movement they made was already written into the pine's endless script. Later, when the night ended, if it can end here, I sat in the ruins again, writing relentlessly in the notebook that pulses like a second heart. But I tried something. Between the lines the pines forced me to scroll, I scratched my own. "Whoever reads this, burn it. Burn every word. Don't let it through." The ink bled, soaking the page as though the book itself rejected my rebellion. When I flipped back, the line was gone, replaced with the pine's mantra, "He writes, therefore we remain." I slammed it shut. The shadows around me only stirred, hissing laughter like rushing wind. The next dusk, I saw the newcomer, not whole, not completely. Through a cracked door, I glimpsed their eyes, wide, bloodshot, darting at every creak of the floor. They hadn't slept. They already smelled a faint smoke, as though their skin carried the forest with it. They looked at me, just directly once, and I knew in that instant they could almost see what I really was, a burned shade draped in a familiar human outline. Their lips parted, ready to ask for help maybe. But before they could speak, the pines pulled me away, my body dissolving into the corridor's endless drag, because the cycle doesn't allow pity. I understand now. It was never about fire. It was never even about Hollow Pines, the town. All of it, the asylum, Warren, the ruins, are just masks. The truth is simpler and worse. The pines endure because they feed on belief. Every page recorded, every story whispered, every outsider who dares imagine that this town might be real, that is fuel, that is timber. You are the firewood. The newcomer in room 7 will burn just like I did, and then they'll write too. Another generation of endless ash. And then one day, when even this body crumbles fully into smoke, I will not end. No, my story will be passed to them. My footsteps will fade from room 6, replaced with theirs in room 7, until room 8 opens, until another arrives, until you.
My name doesn't matter anymore. If you're reading this, it's already too late. When I first checked into the Hollow Pines Inn, I thought it was just a cheap place to sleep along the highway. I'd been driving all day, my eyes ached, my phone had no service, and the flickering neon was the only light for miles. The receptionist barely said a word. Her hands shook as she slid the key across. Room 7. I noticed then that the key fob was scorched at the edges, black as if it had been through a fire. I told myself it was just age, rust, smoke. Nothing more. But that first night. At 2:14, I awoke, not to a sound from my room, but from the hallway. Footsteps, slow, dragging. I held my breath, listening. They stopped right outside my door. The knob rattled. Once, twice, then 3 knocks. I froze. No one should have been there. The motel was empty. And then I heard it. Breathing. Deep, ragged, wet. Like lungs filled with smoke pressing against the other side of the door. I waited until dawn before I dared to move the chair back. On the second night, I thought I saw a man through the peephole. Burned face, hanging jaw, skin cracked like it had melted in a fire. He didn't move like a man. His head lolled, his limbs dragged. But he looked at me, looked right into me. When I blinked, he was gone. The next day, I told myself I'd leave. But by noon, when I tried to find the road out, I ended up back at the motel somehow. Every turn, every direction, every mile, the loop led me back. I started to suspect I wasn't alone in my confusion. There was writing on the walls of the general store, half scraped off. Phrases like,
214. Open the door. Don't write it down. The pines talk through pages. My hands shook as I copied the words into my notebook. I don't even know why. Maybe to prove to myself they were there. But that night, at 2:14, something else happened. The burned man spoke. Open the door. It came low, drawn out, his mouth leaking smoke under the frame. His body didn't shift against the door, but I swear something behind him did. A weight pressing, pressing, pressing. I wanted to scream, but my throat clamped shut. Then, softer, join us. The words didn't sound like his alone. They were layered, dozens of whispers beneath his tone, weaving through him, spiraling everywhere at once, in my head, even inside my heartbeat. I shoved the chair harder under the handle. My pen rolled to the floor. Still, the whispers moved through the cracks of the door and into me. I know this sounds insane, but when I looked down at my notebook, new lines were already forming in my handwriting, words I hadn't written. We walk, we burn, we wait. I dropped it, terrified. That's when I realized something. The smoke leaking under my door smelled faintly of ash and ink. Last night, I heard something worse. Through the whispers, beyond the burnt man's rasp, I heard another voice, familiar, human, almost like mine. It was frantic, broken, buried beneath the pine's chorus. It screamed inside my skull, "Run!" And for the briefest moment, when I pressed my eye to the peephole, I saw him. A man, normal, exhausted, hollow-eyed. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He looked just like me. But when he blinked, his face sagged back into smoke and fire. And I understood. He wasn't warning me. He was me. Or rather, he is who I will become.
I didn't mean to fall asleep, but exhaustion eventually pinned me. When I snapped awake, I already knew what time it was before the clock blinked, 2:14. But this time, it was different. There was no sound of dragging steps in the hall, no knocks, just silence. I breathed, almost relieved. That was when I smelled it. Smoke, bitter and heavy. I turned toward the bathroom, and the mirror was glowing faint orange around its edges. I stepped closer. Steam clung to the glass. Shapes rippled across it, faint as shadows. Hundreds of mouths silently gaping. Ash swept along the floor like black snow. Then a line appeared across the mirror surface, traced from the other side by an unseen hand. You are next. The lights flickered and went out. When they came back, words had been carved into my notebook lying on the nightstand, burned into the paper, not inked. 2:14, the fire moves in. The next night, he came again. The burned man, the one dragging outside my door. But this time, he spoke more clearly. His voice dry, guttural, like char rubbing against char. But beneath it, there was a man's voice cracking with pain.
Don't let them in. It wasn't the pines talking, it was him, whoever he really was before the fire. But then his head jerked unnaturally and smoke poured out of his jaw. His true words drowned under the chorus, "Open the door, right, remember." The handle twisted, knock, knock, knock. I sat frozen, because behind the fear I knew something terrible. Those softer words, that broken plea he gasped, weren't his anymore. They were mine, echoed forward from what I will become. Daytime in hollow pines feels thinner now, fragile like paper about to tear. I walk the streets and see the others, the shopkeeper rocking with no eyes, the receptionist standing in place, no longer pretending to be alive. The town is a stage play designed to fool newcomers, but I can see the masks slipping. And worse, I think they can see me too. That old rocking man lifted his head when I passed today. For the first time, his lips moved. "You're writing already," he rasped. "Once the pines have your hand, they won't ever give it back." I checked later. He was right. More lines had appeared in my notebook, words jagged and smeared, but undeniably in my handwriting. The hollow stays, the hollow feeds, memory is fuel. I don't remember writing them. Tonight, I didn't wait for them to come. I opened my notebook willingly, telling myself I'd track every second, document, prove this is real. But as soon as the pen touched, my body wasn't mine. My hand raced, scrawling faster than I could follow. Pages filled with details I didn't know. Dates from 1925, names of asylum patients, transcripts of screams. It wasn't me recording, it was them recording through me. When it stopped, my lungs crackled with smoke and heat. My chest reflected faint orange in the mirror, and I realized what he meant. The door isn't wood. The door isn't room 7. The door is me. I don't think there's a sun in hollow pines anymore. Even when the sky lightens, it feels like the dull glow of a dying fire rather than light. The air tastes of soot, and every breath carries the weight of voices that don't belong to me. I tried to leave again, walking the same cracked highway. My shoes dragged over the asphalt for hours, I think. But when I finally looked up, the motel loomed ahead again, squatting like a carcass on the edge of town. Its windows stared back at me, each black square a watching eye. At the door to room 7, I hesitated. I thought I saw someone's shadow move in the window from outside. The burned man. Except his shape was my shape. He was already inside. When night came, I told myself I would not fear, that I would face them. At 2:13, the silence was unbearable. Every object in the room seemed to lean toward the door, waiting. My notebook lay on the bed, open, even though I had shut it. Then the clock blinked, 2:14. The knocking didn't come this time. Instead, the door creaked inward on its own. Smoke curled in, black and slow, seeping over the carpet like flooding water. And through the rising shadow, the burned man stepped inside. His head leaned, face cracked and hanging. He opened his mouth. My own voice echoed out, "Join us." I staggered backward until the wall pressed cold against my shoulders. The notebook flew from the bed into my hands, pages flapping wildly. My pen burned hot, forcing my fist to close around it. I screamed, wrenching control, but the first words scrawled themselves anyway. "He walks next." The man lurched closer. His ruined hand, my ruined hand, touched my shoulder. The room stunk of charred flesh, smoke, and ink. And in an instant, I wasn't only me anymore. Memories burned through my skull that weren't mine. Nights in room 6, footsteps in hallways, ash under my nails, endless screaming. His screams, my screams, one blurred into the other.
I felt my legs tremble, then move, drag. The notebook clattered to the floor as my body carried me into the hallway. At first, I thought I was being dragged out of room 7, toward freedom. But no, the hallway stretched too long, swelling into infinity. The wallpaper melted. The carpet darkened with soot. Doors lined the hallway, endless, each with faint light beneath. From behind every one, I could hear whispers, begging, praying. Others like me, others before me. And my burned hand raised itself to knock. 1, 2, 3. There is no leaving Hollow Pines. The town is not cursed. It is the curse. Every century, the Pines choose a new keeper, someone who comes, someone who stays, someone who writes. The fire did not consume them in 1925. It lit the perpetual furnace of this place, and Dr. Warren was only its first voice. Now, I am the next. I know this because the hallway is mine now. Already, my shadow paces it. Already my throat wheezes with smoke. Already my knock passes from door to door. Tomorrow, someone else will drive down that road. Cheap motel, exhausted. Key slid across the counter with shaking hands. They'll open the door to their room and tell themselves it's just for one night. And I will be here, waiting. Knock, knock, knock. I don't remember where my name ended or when the fire moved fully into my chest. There was no exact moment of surrender. It was more like a slow inhalation, smoke filling my lungs until all that was me thinned into ash. Now I walk without resistance. My feet drag the same rhythm every night at 2:14. The hallway stretches around me, infinite, lined with restless doors. Behind each one is a voice, begging, sobbing, denying, just like mine once did. I raise my hand. I knock. 1, 2, 3. The cycle turns. Dr. Warren still watches from the ruins, her burned hands lifted like a conductor. The chorus chants behind her, hundreds of hollow voices. But she no longer frightens me. She no longer needs to. I carry her work forward. These walls, these trees, these endless fires, they aren't prisons. They are roots growing outward, finding hosts, finding voices. Each stranger who listens, each soul who imagines Hollow Pines adds kindling, keeps the embers alive. You thought this was just a story, words on a page, a horror meant to unsettle for a while before your lights go out. But that was always the mistake. The Pines live in words. They live in memory. They live in belief. That's why they made me write. That's why they make every one of us write. Because once you know Hollow Pines, once its name sits inside you, the road begins to bend. The trees lean closer. The town waits for you just one wrong turn away.
And when you arrive, you'll see me, or whatever remains of me, my face flickering between what I was and what the fire has made me. You'll hear the pace of my boots dragging through the hall. And maybe on the second night, or the third, as your clock blinks 2:14, you'll hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And when the door opens, whether you want it to or not, you'll understand the final truth. There is no end to Hollow Pines, only the next keeper. And now, it's you.